welcome to another episode of the C-Suite Edge. I'm your host, John Light, founder and CEO of Sabretooth Recruiting. And today, I think there's a very interesting conversation upcoming with Brian Elliott, who is a partner at scalefirm.com. Brian, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, John. Glad to be here.
Awesome, man. Hey, look, I know you're an attorney, and I know you've practiced law for, going on 3 decades. Let's not say 30 years. It sounds like it's more than we want it to be, but going that direction. I'm curious if you could maybe share with us a 90-second rundown or so on Brian Elliott, on Scale Firm, and what brought you there, and what are y'all trying to accomplish in the marketplace?
Yeah, no, wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, John. And I'm glad to introduce myself to your audience. The short story, right, is I am a career general counsel. So my entire career, I spent in-house in various in-house roles, general counsel in a variety of industries, from high tech to finance to e-commerce, apparel, and fashion. Mm-hmm. And over that time, I had my experience on the client side of legal services, hiring and firing great law firms, right? And that really has crystallized, my view of the market. And eventually I decided I wanted to do this myself. And I went out and I, teamed up with some partners, and we started Scale LLP, which is a national law firm. We have now 80 attorneys. We're in 21 states, and our goal is to become the best remote law firm in the United States. And when I say remote, it means we have a distributed practice. We don't have a lot of overhead on central offices and back offices, and we pass those savings on to our clients. We keep our operations lean and efficient so that we can have the best lawyers anywhere we find them, and they can practice with our great clients.
Awesome, man. Because I think that's the legal professional services space, the legal space is so interesting to me because it's not cheap, right? You want to get things done right the first time. And let's face it, it's not always done right the first time, but a lot of companies, a lot of individuals are hesitant because they see the cost commitment. And especially if they do some of what you guys do from an augmentation standpoint, from crises to functioning as a GC for companies that need it, and even fractionally or full time. So it's a big area to play in, but the scale when it comes to what it costs, half hour, an hour of services, or this function or whatever, I think that's a tough nut to crack. And having a distributed workforce where you minimize your overhead and can kind of give back in a sense, i.e. make it more palatable for small business owners, medium business owners, families, that's pretty impressive. Especially the fact that you all have grown to have 80 practicing attorneys in 21 states. So I always am interested in what's the engine driving that. And the best way I know to get to it is to ask, what's the biggest, hairiest, gnarliest problem that you and Scale Firm bring to the table to solve for your clients?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest issue that our clients face is a misalignment in the legal industry, right? Mm-hmm. So when you hire, and you just intimated to this, John, you hire a lawyer and they're going to bill you on an hourly basis more often than not, right? So there's a built-in incentive to, for the law firm to charge more hours. The more hours you charge, the more you bill, the more success your law firm has, which is exactly the opposite from what clients want. Clients want efficient. They want the problem to be solved. In fact, most clients don't ever want to hire a lawyer at all. You only hire a lawyer because you have to, right? Nobody ever wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'd love to hire a lawyer today, right?
No
the lawyer is just a tool. Exactly. The lawyer is just a tool to accomplish some other goal. It's, resolve a dispute or transact a deal, or it's move into a new market. You're hiring the lawyer to do a specific business function. And we see this misalignment in the market. So part of Scale, and at Scale, I'm the practice group leader of a group that we call General Counsel Services. Mm-hmm. And General Counsel Services is unique because everybody that works in that department of the firm has significant in-house prior experience. That means we come at a problem like a business operator. We're not just, we are well-pedigreed lawyers that come from great schools, and we have been trained in the biggest firms. So we've got all that. but then we look at problems from the standpoint of of an in-house lawyer or a business operator. A lot of us have been founders and have started our own practices and our own businesses. So we bring that difference to the market. I think the other thing, to get to the pricing point, right, is, we offer predictable pricing. And that's one of the things that, scope creep in law is a big problem. And it goes two ways. One is you hire somebody on an hourly basis. You never know when those hours are going to stop. That's one problem. And then when a law firm has an incentive to, add more billing parties to a matter, then that often happens. And then you get this scope creep, and then the bill ends up being much larger than a lot of clients have anticipated. So we offer, not just the method of billing, we offer flat fees and fixed fee retainers and things like that. But we also do it in a way that people would be more familiar with, in terms of generating a scope of work, and then we perform to the scope of work. So parties are well informed ahead of time exactly what the budget's going to be, and then we perform to that budget. But then the third thing that we do in our general counsel services group is we really promote a fully integrated legal function. And what I mean by that, John, is that we have not only do we embed our lawyers in the business that we serve, so we're either there physically on site, day by day, or we're embedded in your Slack or your Teams, and we're part of the regular cadence of communication within the firm. So it's not like you have to stop what you're doing as a business, call the lawyer, get some feedback, and then turn back to what you're doing. We're part of that process the whole way along, right? And we team with our clients in that way. But then we also work with them to build legal infrastructure that's embedded into their processes, so that hopefully they don't need to call us at all.
Well, that's the ideal. You shared an example with me pre-show. I'm curious, if you could if you have an example, of course not violating an NDA or confidentiality, anything of that nature, but is there an example or scenario you could share that really shows the bandwidth and efficiency, the effectiveness of your services? Some hairy problem you had to deal with, or whatever it might have been.
Yeah, I can give you a couple examples. The one we briefly spoke about before was a situation where we had a major U.S. brand that had suddenly lost their general counsel, right? And they needed a replacement, and they needed to not miss any steps along the way. So they hired Scale. We came in, we provided that replacement for their GC function seamlessly, right? And then we covered a lot of ground for them to make sure that they weren't missing any steps, but we partnered with them to recruit and identify their next candidate for a long-term internal GC, and we helped onboard that GC. We helped her bring on her new team, train them, and then we stayed with them during that process to transition, to make sure that the legal function was well supported and they didn't miss any beats, right? So that's an example of how we do a functional or a fractional GC function within a company, and we can drop in on a moment's notice and keep things moving at velocity. Another example, a little bit different, right, was I have a client where we came into a high volume commercial contract situation. This is a fast growing Silicon Valley company. They were signing commercial agreements. It seemed like with every single company in the United States every single day. There's a lot of B2B contracts that need to be negotiated, and they didn't have in-house legal. So Scale supplied that for them. We became their department, and we worked with them on a number of these contracts. But as you might be familiar with, when you negotiate the same contract over and over again, the same issues come up repeatedly. So what we did is we built out a self-executing playbook. And we gave them a template that they could use, and we trained their sales force on it, so the sales force could use it to implement recommended and approved modifications to the contract depending on what their counterparty objected to. And what that did is it not only improved the speed of the contracting process and allowed us to get, because then they only escalated the things that weren't covered in that playbook, right? But it actually reduced the amount of time that they needed to call a lawyer by 80%, right?
Wow.
So we're delivering direct value to that company by by actually putting ourselves out of a job. And we did it by embedding, this is where I talk about the legal infrastructure. We embedded legal infrastructure into their process so that they could help themselves and get farther faster.
I'm just looking for the right word because it's not altruistic, but we talk about an 80% reduction. I translated into say, month over month, they used 100 hours of your services. Now they're using 20.
Yeah, that's correct.
It sounds self-defeating in a sense, but if I'm the customer, if I'm the client, that's what I want.
So in this particular case, we absolutely, it's classic, we worked ourselves out of a job, right? But that's what we set out to do. That was the job that we were there to do. We were there to improve that company and make sure that they could stand on their own without needing to call us every day. And we did that. Yeah. But we created such a great relationship with them this past year when they wanted to launch an entire new AI business. I was the first call, right? So wow. I got the call from their GC saying, Brian, we're going to stand up this whole new division, help us plan it out, let's work on the strategy together. And we did that side by side with them. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. That's actually a great story because it's funny because I just had this conversation today, the day we were recording, at lunch with a market president for a commercial bank. And we're having lunch and he said, I've never tried in 30 years in the banking space, I've never tried to make more than we should. I've never tried to drive the numbers up. He says, we just focused on delivering excellence and building a relationship. And he was telling me, he says, we have so much business coming in. We just launched this market. He said 2.5 years prior, not spend a dime on advertising. He said, if I put a billboard up on the freeway, we would have too much business. This is right now. Our big struggle is making sure that we don't run ourselves into the ground because we can pick and choose. It's just coming out of the woodwork. Why? Because years of developing great relationships, delivering excellent value, understanding what the customer wants, the client wants, and delivering it in such a way that they just turn around and say, I've got good news. I need to talk to Brian. Or we're launching something new. I've got to talk to Brian about it.
Those are the best calls, right? The call from the person you did some great work with a couple of years ago calls you fresh and says, I've got a brand new project. I love those calls. And it's true in our industry as well. It's very true that the best way to build a business, do business development is to first provide excellent service. And if you do that, without question, you're going to get that referral, you'll get the next phone call. It's a great way. And that's what we've been doing. And we've been growing really fantastically over the last 5 years.
Man, it's a great story. And you know what? It's funny because in my space, I have these conversations on a regular basis, and you're chatting to someone about the impact of AI on the workforce and all this other stuff. And I believe firmly that as AI promulgates, it gets out into the market in a usable form. The human touch, the human connection is just going to become more and more valuable. Now, we don't know how that will appear or be expressed in the marketplace, but we know it's going to happen, I believe, anyway. And it's fascinating for me. It strikes a chord to listen to someone in a high-level professional services space, very competitive space too. I mean, really and truly. And to listen to you and hear, I think maybe 4 or 5 times now you've talked about customer service.
Yeah.
And where do you learn customer service? Maybe from being a customer, hey, this is what I like. But what about all these entry-level jobs that are evaporating because tech is taking over? And it makes me concerned for the future because I wonder, 20 years from now, will someone who's sitting in your chair have the same mindset? Because that's something you learned when you were early on in your career. I'm sure that's not some revelation you've had recently.
No, these things develop over time. But I think let me share with you my perspective on where legal service is going with AI. Right? A lot of people like the phrase that we hear a lot is AI is not going to replace lawyers. Lawyers will be replaced by other lawyers who are using AI. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's wrong. Right? And I think that what I'm seeing is that lawyers eventually will be replaced by clients who are using AI. And that my example that I gave you about a self-executing playbook that really worked ourselves out of a job, it's that on steroids, right? It's the clients are going to help themselves. The job of the lawyer is going to be less in the future about providing a legal service than it will be implementing a legal infrastructure, right? So we're going to become the technicians and the technologists that will like map out the legal decision tree that is embedded in the standard operating procedure that a company will use, and that legal mindset is going to be then infused in everything that they do. So they're not going to have to stop and think, maybe I should call a lawyer, because that the lawyer's opinion, the lawyer's vision is already embedded in what they're doing, right? That's where I see it going. I think that in terms of training young lawyers, learning customer service and all that, it's just going to be a little bit different, right? I don't think that ever goes away. There's still going to be spots for young people to get their put in the time, but the time might not be in reviewing 100 contracts. The time might be in reviewing the AI's output of the analysis of 100 contracts, right? And it's still going to be there. The analysis, learning, and the delivery to the customer is still going to be there. It's just going to be a little bit different.
Awesome, man. Hey, fantastic insights, Brian. I'm grateful that you were able to join and share. I'm curious to find out if somebody wants to connect with you, to learn more about Scale. I know that they could go to scalefirm.com, but what's the best way besides the website? Or maybe it is the website, I don't know, but what's the best way for someone to find you and get in touch?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out and check me out on LinkedIn. I'll glad to connect with you there. But as you said, John, scalefirm.com is a great place to start. You can find me everywhere, but be glad to connect with anybody.
Brian, thanks so much for joining me today.
All right, thanks, John. Pleasure.